The lake was calm that morning, the kind of stillness that makes you breathe slower without realizing it. I was on the dock, tightening down new boards when a sharp voice sliced through the quiet. "This lake belongs to everyone," turned and watched a well-dressed woman stride across my property like she owned the ground under her feet. Behind her were three strangers, awkwardly following as if they weren't sure they should even be here. The woman, later I'd learn her name, was Diane, stopped just short of where the old marina began. She pointed toward the water like she was indicating a crime scene. I set my hammer down and stood up, brushing sawdust from my jeans. My camera hung around my neck out of habit. I rarely went anywhere without it, even if I was just repairing something. The sunlight reflected off the lake like glass, and I wanted the moment to stay peaceful. But one look at Diane told me she wasn't leaving without a confrontation. She crossed her arms and spoke as if I was supposed to thank her for the intrusion. She claimed the marina was a shared community asset and insisted I needed to open it up to the neighborhood. I calmly explained that this marina has been in my family since 1968, long before any HOA existed here. She gave a tight smile, the kind that pretends to be polite while hiding judgment, and started talking about neighborhood unity and community spirit. The three people behind her shifted nervously. One man admitted he didn't realize the marina was private. Diane had told them it was open to residents. She waved a hand like the truth was optional, insisting she had reviewed legal clauses that allowed community access. She even suggested a schedule, weekends only, limited hours, like she was offering a gracious compromise. I kept my voice steady. There is no compromise required. This property is not part of the HOA, and their rules don't apply here. Her expression shifted. Smile gone, irritation sharp and visible. She reminded me that, good, neighbors make sacrifices, then turned and walked away with her entourage. As soon as she left, the quiet returned, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. My grandmother left this land to me, every boundary, every board, every inch of shoreline. She taught me about dignity and how important it is to protect what matters. I knew she'd expect me to defend this place. A few days later, while drinking coffee, I opened an email from the HOA board. Subject line, shared amenity access, marina facility. My stomach dropped. The message wasn't a friendly suggestion, it was a demand. They wanted me to sign a document, allowing the neighborhood to use the marina 7 days a week. The attached agreement included liability waivers, maintenance expectations, and even a permanent easement, meaning they wanted legal rights to access my property forever. I called Diane directly, hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding. Instead, she lectured me again about community needs. When I asked for proof of this so-called legal authority, she suddenly couldn't find the documents. After that call, things shifted fast. Neighbors who normally waved stopped making eye contact. Some crossed the street to avoid me. A friend down the road texted to warn me that Diane was in the neighborhood group chat writing, that I was hoarding a natural resource. It didn't matter. That this property legally has nothing to do with the HOA. Diane was building a narrative where I was the problem, and I knew then things were about to get ugly. The pressure escalated faster than I expected. 2 days later, when I went down to check the dock, I found 5 people casually fishing from it. Gear everywhere, coolers open, acting like it was a public park. I approached calmly and let them know this was private property. One of the men shrugged and said, Diane told them the marina was community space, as if that settled the matter. When I repeated that the land wasn't part of the HOA and asked them to leave, he got defensive and muttered something about me being selfish. The others reluctantly gathered their things, clearly irritated that I didn't let them stay. After they left, I noticed trash on my dock, bottle caps, bait packets, even a broken tackle box. That was the moment I realized this wasn't ignorance. This was intentional. I ordered high-resolution security cameras that same night, the kind I used during wildlife. Shoots, weatherproof, motion-triggered, crystal clear. If anyone tried this again, I'd have proof. And just as I expected, trespassing became more frequent. Discarded cans, footprints where no one should have been, strangers wandering along the shoreline. Then came the HOA meeting invitation, or rather a summons. I wasn't part of the HOA, yet they wanted me, there to discuss community cooperation. The meeting room was packed, every chair full, residents whispering as I walked in. Diane sat at the head table like a judge. She spoke as though she was giving a motivational speech, talking about neighborhood, unity, and shared Recreational benefits, she implied without saying my name that I was the only thing preventing the community from enjoying the lake. Residents raised their hands one after another, talking about fishing with their kids, outdoor bonding, and how I was denying nature to families. Nobody mentioned property rights. To them, wanting access was enough to justify taking access. When I finally spoke, I presented the facts. Deed from 1968, survey lines, tax records, clear proof that the property has nothing to do with the HOA. I offered to show anyone the documents. Instead of acknowledging the truth, Diane smoothed her blazer and announced that legal technicalities don't erase moral responsibility. Then she proposed to pressuring me to share or face community consequences. 11 hands went up. Only 2 people, Willa and an older man, voted against it. I left without arguing, but things didn't end there. Within 48 hours, a Facebook group appeared. Save Our Lake Access. The page had pictures of my marina with captions implying I was a selfish, entitled guy who hoarded natural resources. People I'd never met commented like they knew me personally. Someone pulled my wildlife photography from my website and wrote, "Funny how he photographs nature but won't let kids enjoy nature." Willa tried defending me. Diane blocked her in an hour. And then the lock on my gate was cut. The next morning, I walked down and saw a full-blown neighborhood festival happening on my land. Grills, picnic tables, coolers, kids running around like it was a public beach. A banner stretched across 2 posts. Lakeview Estates Community Event. People waved at me like I was the visitor. I told them, firmly but politely, that this was private property. Suddenly, phones were recording. Adults accusing me of harassing families and someone loudly yelling that I was threatening innocent people. Their goal wasn't access anymore, it was control. So I did the only thing left. I called the police. When the first patrol car arrived, it was like the crowd deflated. The deputy reviewed my documentation, looked at the crowd, and said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "You're trespassing. All of you need to leave." Diane was furious, face red, voice cracking, swearing this wasn't over. But I had something she didn't. Evidence, cameras, dates, times, and a paper trail proving every lie. She wanted a battle? Fine. I was done being polite. It was time to fight on my terms. After the police cleared the property, I knew I couldn't rely on warnings anymore. I needed backup. I spent that afternoon reviewing the camera footage frame by frame, organizing it with timestamps, printing screenshots of Diane cutting the lock and leading the crowd. I uploaded everything to multiple drives because if there's one thing I've learned photographing wildlife, it's that documentation beats argument every time. The next morning, I walked into the office of a property attorney named Malcolm Hastings, a quiet, serious guy whose desk was buried under legal pads and folders. At first, he seemed indifferent. HOA cases were messy, emotional, and usually impossible to win. But when I laid out the hard drive and handed him printed evidence, trespassing, harassment, false legal claims, even Diane knocking the deed out of my hand, his entire demeanor changed. He watched the footage silently, pausing on the banner that said community event. "This," he said, leaning back in his chair, "isn't just trespassing. This is coordinated harassment." He started listing violations. Defamation, property interference, fraud if she was claiming legal authority she didn't have. Malcolm requested the official HOA bylaws from the county records office, and we combed them line by line. There was nothing, no clause allowing access to property outside the HOA boundaries. No legal grounds, no community benefit exception. Diane had fabricated everything. Malcolm drafted a cease and desist letter, 10 pages long, demanding an immediate stop to trespassing, online defamation, and any claims of legal authority. He gave them 7 days to comply before we filed civil lawsuits and criminal charges. When the letter was delivered, the neighborhood exploded. Willa texted me saying Diane had called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming I was trying to bankrupt the community. The next evening, Malcolm and I attended the regular HOA meeting, this time on our terms. The room was packed. Residents lined the walls because there weren't enough seats. Diane tried controlling the narrative quickly. She announced that I had hired a lawyer and was threatening baseless lawsuits, painting herself and the HOA as victims. Malcolm stood and asked permission to present a response. And when we got the nod, we began. I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed the deed, survey maps, and tax records. "This land predates your HOA by 40-plus years, I said calmly. Murmurs rippled through the room. Then came the video, Trespass after trespass, clear faces, timestamps. Diane directing people, cutting the lock, waving her clipboard like a general. The room went silent except for Diane's breathing. When the final clip showed her knocking the deed out of my hand, someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Diane stood abruptly, claiming the footage was doctored, that I had manipulated it to destroy her reputation. Malcolm calmly explained the files. Had metadata verifying they had, never been edited. Residents turned on her instantly, people demanding to know why she lied, why she told them the marina was legally theirs. One man said, "You dragged us into this mess." A woman whispered, "We trespassed because of you." And then something I never expected. One of the HOA board members motioned to remove Diane as president. The vote was nearly unanimous. She stared around the room in disbelief, realizing the power she used to control others had just evaporated. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply watched a woman who tried to take everything from me, lose the only thing she ever cared about, control. And for the first time since this started, I felt the tide turn. My land was protected. The truth was out. And this time, the entire neighborhood witnessed it. After that meeting, I expected silence, maybe even peace. But instead, the fallout hit like a wave. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with texts and missed calls, mostly neighbors apologizing or trying to justify why they believed Diane so easily. I didn't reply. Apologies don't erase what people willingly did. Malcolm called and asked me to come to his office to discuss next steps. When I arrived, he was already reviewing additional evidence. I'd emailed him screenshots of the HOA's social media smear campaign. Malcolm laid out 3 possible paths. Sue Diane personally for damages and defamation, pursue criminal charges for trespassing and impersonating legal authority, or negotiate a settlement where she accepted full accountability, under strict legal conditions. I asked him which gave me the most control with the least drama. He recommended a settlement plus filing the criminal complaint so there'd be a permanent legal record if she ever tried anything again. We agreed. 3 days later, we sat across from Diane, her husband, and their attorney in a neutral law office. The tension in that room was suffocating. Diane wouldn't even look at me, her posture stiff, jaw tight like she still believed she was the victim. Malcolm remained calm, steady, almost surgical. He began listing our evidence, video recordings, social media defamation, trespass incidents, and her fabricated claim of legal authority. Her attorney tried spinning it as a misunderstanding, saying Diane made decisions in the spirit of community. Malcolm slid a printed page across the table, an enlarged screenshot of Diane's Facebook post implying I was a selfish landholder. Next, he played a short clip from my security camera, Diane cutting the lock and leading the crowd onto my property. Diane's face drained of color. You could have heard dust settling in the room. Then Malcolm presented our terms. Diane must publicly apologize at the next HOA meeting, remove all defamatory posts and replace them with a correction, pay $15,000 to cover my legal fees, pay $5,000 as compensation for using my copyrighted photographs without permission, and agree not to come within 500 feet of my property for 5 years. If she refused any term, we'd proceed with the full lawsuit and criminal prosecution. Diane's attorney asked for a brief recess. Diane and her husband left the room to whisper fight in the hallway. We heard some of it, her voice strained, his tone frustrated. When they returned, her attorney said they agreed to everything except the public apology. They offered a written letter instead. Malcolm didn't even blink. "No," he said. "You humiliated him publicly. The correction must be public too." Another recess, another argument, and then finally they agreed. Her signature on that settlement was the moment she lost the last shred of control she had left. 3 weeks later, at the HOA meeting, Diane stood in front of the same neighbors she once commanded and read her apology aloud. She admitted everything: the lies, the trespassing, the fabricated legal authority, the harassment. The room was dead silent. No one defended her. No one pitied her. After she finished, she sat down and stared at her hands, trembling. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Willa recorded it and sent it to me later. Watching Diane fold under the weight of her own behavior wasn't satisfying. It just confirmed what I already knew. If someone builds their world on lies, eventually the truth crushes it. After the apology, everything slowly shifted. Not dramatically, not like some movie-ending celebration, but in small, quiet ways that mattered. The settlement went through exactly as written. The $20,000 check arrived. The defamatory posts vanished from social media, and the HOA filed documentation acknowledging that my property was completely outside their jurisdiction. I used a portion of the money to donate to a youth fishing program, ironically supporting the kind of community access Diane pretended to care about, and used the rest to upgrade the dock and install professional signage. Clear, bold, and visible from the road. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. On top of that, the criminal complaint Malcolm filed became public record. Diane didn't get jail time, but she was ordered to complete 40 hours of community service. The irony didn't escape me. She wanted control over a community space, and now she had to serve the community in a very different way. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Neighbors waved again, some out of guilt, others because they finally realized the truth. A few invited me to barbecues or neighborhood gatherings, but I politely declined. Trust doesn't rebuild just because someone changes their tone. Willa remained the one person who had been on my side from the beginning. She'd stop by occasionally with coffee and updates on HOA drama, which, thankfully, now mostly revolved around landscaping budgets and mailbox repairs. The new HOA president was quiet, factual, focused on real responsibilities instead of power trips. I reclaimed the rhythm of my life, morning photography sessions on the dock, afternoons repairing things around the property, evenings editing photos in the soft lake-like glow. Slowly, the marina shifted back from battleground to sanctuary. People still asked occasionally if they could fish, but now they asked properly, with respect, not entitlement. Sometimes I said yes, sometimes I said no. The difference was simple. I had the choice. One afternoon, a family visiting relatives in the neighborhood stopped at the gate. The father waved and asked politely if they could fish for an hour. Something about the honesty in his voice made me say yes. The kids fished off the end of the dock, laughing even though they didn't catch anything. When they left, they thanked me like I'd given them something special. It reminded me of what my grandmother always taught. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out, they're about protecting the peace inside. Over time, I began a new photography project, inspired by everything that had happened. I titled it Boundaries. Photos of territorial wildlife, property lines, natural borders. In the final chapter, I included an image of my restored dock at sunrise, soft orange light, bouncing off still water, and beneath it, a line of text, "Peace is worth defending." One crisp autumn morning, while fog rolled low across the lake, I sat on the dock with my grandmother's camera beside me. The air was cold enough that my breath showed, and the world felt unbothered, untouched by conflict. I realized then that winning wasn't about beating Diane. It wasn't about the settlement, the apology, or the legal victory. Winning was waking up to quiet. Winning was peace. I stood and walked back toward the house, the gravel crunching under my boots, the dock solid beneath me, the signs at the entrance reflecting the pale morning light. This place was mine, not because a deed said so, not because a courtroom agreed, but because I had refused to let someone take what mattered. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Stand your ground, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself whole. That's exactly what I did, and that's exactly why the lake is calm again.